Welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to be talking about EaseCopy and why I think it should be an integral part of every animator's toolkit, especially if you're doing character animation. Now, when I say I have the secret to creating better character animations with less frustration, EaseCopy might not be the first thing that comes to your mind. But as I was thinking about how to create smoother, more dynamic movements, I realized that EaseCopy plays a huge role in creating those nice, smooth, dynamic animations. And the best part is that EaseCopy is completely free. Also, if you're an EaseCopy veteran, stick around to the end of the video because I have an extra bonus tip that makes using EaseCopy even quicker and easier. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Our goal is simple, to help you go from feeling lost and frustrated with character animation to feeling excited and eager to animate your characters. Now, you might be thinking that character animation is too difficult or complex for you, but I'm here to tell you that anyone can learn to animate characters that are full of life. If you can animate shapes or text in After Effects, you can learn to animate characters. All you need is the right tools and the right process in place. So if you're ready to take your character animation skills to the next level, stick around. After we're done talking about EaseCopy, I'm going to tell you exactly how to become a character animation guru, and trust me, with the right tools and the right process, anyone can create amazing character animations. And without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so to explain how EaseCopy works, let's talk about what a keyframe is. A keyframe is like a little box that stores a bunch of data, like the value of whatever property that keyframe is on. So if it is a position keyframe, then it stores the X and Y position data. If it's a scale keyframe, then it stores the scale percentage. If it's a rotation keyframe, it stores the rotation angle. You get it, you get what I mean. But this little box also stores what is called the incoming and outgoing influence, or the easing is what we usually call it. These influence values are expressed by percentages between 0% and 100%. And you can actually go and access these percentages in the keyframe velocity window. These percentages are what you are changing when you're pulling and pushing these handles in the graph editor. So when you copy a keyframe, you copy all of this data in this box. EaseCopy, however, lets you decide which set of data, the value or the easing, you want to paste to another keyframe. Whereas if you're pasting the keyframe with the old-fashioned Control-V method, you're always pasting that entire box of data. So without much imagination, you can probably start to envision some ways in which the EaseCopy can be useful and can save you some time. Anytime you're dealing with a bunch of keyframes spanned across multiple layers, it's never a fun time to open up the graph editor and try to change the easing of all those keyframes at the same time, especially if those keyframes are all offset from each other. With EaseCopy, you can just make your changes to one of the layers and then you can copy that easing and paste that new easing to the rest of the keyframes. Now, if you're somebody who uses flow or motion to apply your easing, you might be thinking, I can apply the same easings to a bunch of keyframes by just selecting them all and then clicking on my preset. Why would I need EaseCopy? And that's fair enough, especially for a simple animation like this, but I find when animating characters, the presets that come with flow or motion only get me about 70 to 80% of the way to where I want to be with my animation. That last like little 20% of adjustments, I have to go in and adjust the curves manually. Let's take this animation I did a while ago. I have this animation where the shoulders raise and then relax slightly, and I've created a custom speed graph for this motion. And I need the paths on my torso to sync up with the motion of my shoulders. Because obviously right now, as you can tell, there's just something kind of off. My torso layer has a bunch of path keyframes because I'm animating all these little paths that make up the collar of the sweater, as well as the actual shape of the sweater itself. If I want to try to match the easing of all these keyframes to the easing of the shoulders, it's nearly impossible. First, because when I bring up the position property and then the path properties in the graph editor, you can barely see the speed curves of the path keyframes. But second, because it becomes nearly impossible to select the path keyframes without also selecting the position keyframes. How in the world am I supposed to match these easings up myself? Not only that, but if I were to go and select all the keyframes that are moving with the same motion on all the other layers in this animation and try to go to the graph editor to match them all up to the easing of the shoulders, forget about it. But with EaseCopy, this all becomes effortless. Watch how my torso shape snaps to the shoulders when I copy and paste the easing, and it remains locked to those shoulders for the remainder of the animation because those easings are now matched perfectly. Another example of how I use EaseCopy to create a more dynamic movement is in this unfinished animation of the snowboarder. I've yet to finish it. In this animation, I actually started by animating the snowboard, and then once I got the motion of the snowboard down, I then went and I added on the boots where I had to keyframe the position, the rotation, and the path of the boot. And instead of trying to manually match the easing to what I had already established with the snowboard's motion, I just simply copied the easing from the snowboard and pasted it to all the keyframes on my boot, and then everything flawlessly matched up, more or less. There were some instances where I had to add in some linear keyframes in the middle of two keyframes just to adjust the motion path a little bit. The great thing about EaseCopy as well is that if I want to come back and adjust the easing of the snowboard's motion back and forth, I don't have to go through and grab all the keyframes that are synced up with the motion of the snowboard layer. I can just make those adjustments I need to on the snowboard and then copy those easings and paste it to all the other keyframes. We've talked a lot about easing, but what about the value button? When does that come in handy? Well, this example of a character walking into frame provides a salient example of how I might use the value pasting button in a character animation. I've gotten a lot of questions about how to animate characters that move across the frame without their feet sliding as they walk. The key is to separate the dimensions of the position of the foot and then keyframe the X position and independently of the Y position. And when you want your foot to be planted on the ground, these two X position keyframes need to be exactly the same. But sometimes, for whatever reason, you notice that somehow, some way, one of these keyframes was nudged and now you have some sliding in the foot and when it's supposed to be stationary. Now your natural reaction might be to just simply copy the keyframe with Control-C and paste it here. And while the foot does snap back into place, when you play it back, there is still some drifting. And that is because the easing isn't actually the same on both of these keyframes. And it's easier to see what I mean when we're in the value graph of the graph editor. Here we can see that the first keyframe has curves on the left and then on the right, it's straight. That is the incoming and outgoing influence we talked about earlier. When we copy and paste the traditional way, we are pasting the same incoming and outgoing influence, that whole box, which is, as you can tell, messes up the easing of our second keyframe. So to avoid this, we can use the paste value button instead of using the Control-V method, and our foot snaps back into place where it's supposed to be and our easing is left alone. Those are just a few examples of how EaseCopy helps me with my character animations. But I'm interested to know what you think. Are you going to use EaseCopy as a part of your character animation workflow? Hopefully some of you who haven't yet tried out EaseCopy before are having some light bulbs go off and you're starting to see how you can use it in your own animation. Character animation can be a tricky thing to learn and to get right, so anything helps, right? There's just so much to learn, such as design, rigging, and then animation, and that all needs to be pieced together and it's hard to do on your own. So it's no surprise that it can be frustrating, and it's even more frustrating when after you put in all that effort, your animations don't turn out how you pictured them. And then when a client requests you do a character animation, you're filled with dread and hopelessness. However, don't lose hope. With practice and guidance, you can learn to bring your characters and ideas to life. In next week's video, I'm going to share with you the full blueprint for how to go from complete character animation noob to a character animation master, and how you can go from someone who is completely lost when it comes to the topic of character animation to someone who can design, rig, and animate any character and do it all with ease. Now, before we conclude, I did promise to share a bonus tip for using the EaseCopy tool more efficiently. You know these three buttons here in the panel? Well, you can actually map those to hotkeys on your keyboard to make using EaseCopy even quicker. Here's how. When you download EaseCopy, you'll get 3 additional scripts. All you have to do is copy those scripts to your scripts folder, but not inside the scripts UI folder. Then to run the scripts, go to File, Scripts, and you can run the script or run the function of each button from here. But here's the cool part. You can also map a hotkey in After Effects to run these scripts from this menu. To do this, go to Edit and then select your hotkeys. In the search box, type in Scripts. You'll see the 3 scripts you pasted into your Scripts folder, and you can assign each of them a unique hotkey. For example, you could assign Shift-C to copy function, Shift-X to the ease paste function, and Shift-Z to the paste value function. Then click OK, and now you can easily copy and paste your easing or your values with your hotkeys instead of selecting the keyframes, going up to the panel to copy, then selecting the new keyframes and going back to the panel to paste. Pretty neat, right? All right, that does it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you're subscribed and have that bell notification turned on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.